Not long ago, disruption in business was treated like a rare earthquake. It might shake the ground for a while, but eventually stability would return and long-term plans could resume. Today, that assumption feels outdated. The business world has learned to expect disruption as a constant condition rather than a temporary event. And that expectation has permanently reshaped how companies plan, invest, and compete. This shift did not happen overnight. It developed through repeated shocks that challenged long-standing assumptions. A global pandemic halted operations across industries. Supply chains fractured in ways few executives had modeled. Inflation surged after years of stability. Interest rates climbed rapidly, increasing the cost of capital. Geopolitical tensions disrupted trade flows. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence accelerated competitive change across nearly every sector. Individually, each event was significant. Together, they created a new baseline reality. Stability can no longer be assumed. Before this period, many companies optimized for efficiency above all else. Lean inventories, concentrated supplier networks, and tightly managed cost structures were considered best practice. Growth strategies were built around predictable demand curves and stable financing conditions. When disruption hit repeatedly, those assumptions proved fragile. Supply chain breakdowns revealed how dependent companies had become on single regions or suppliers. Shipping bottlenecks delayed production for months. Shortages of critical components forced companies to idle factories. Businesses realized that efficiency without redundancy created hidden risk. As a result, the definition of operational excellence began to change. Companies diversified suppliers, increased inventory buffers for key inputs, and explored nearshoring or reshoring parts of their production. These moves sometimes raised short-term costs, but leaders increasingly viewed them as investments in resilience. The financial side of business underwent a similar transformation. During years of low interest rates, debt was cheap and refinancing was accessible. Companies could pursue aggressive expansion strategies with confidence that capital markets would remain supportive. When rates rose quickly, the cost of leverage became more visible. Firms carrying heavy debt loads faced tighter margins and reduced flexibility. Investors began rewarding strong balance sheets and consistent cash flow over rapid but volatile growth. The business world learned that financial resilience is not optional. It is strategic protection against the next unknown shock. Demand patterns also became less predictable. Consumer behavior shifted rapidly between goods and services. Enterprise clients delayed or reduced budgets in response to uncertainty. Forecasting models that relied on historical patterns proved unreliable. This forced companies to rethink planning processes. Instead of building rigid annual plans, many adopted rolling forecasts and scenario-based modeling. Leadership teams regularly revisit assumptions and adjust strategies in real time. The lesson was clear. Static planning does not survive dynamic conditions. Technology accelerated this realization. Artificial intelligence, automation, and digital platforms began reshaping industries at unprecedented speed. Competitive advantages that once lasted decades could erode within years. Companies understood that technological disruption was no longer confined to tech firms. Manufacturing, healthcare, retail, logistics, and finance all faced pressure from software-driven innovation. In response, technology investment became both offensive and defensive. Businesses invest in AI and automation not only to grow, but to avoid falling behind competitors who move faster. Labor markets contributed another layer of unpredictability. Worker shortages increased wage pressures in certain sectors. Remote work changed expectations around flexibility and productivity. Talent mobility accelerated. Companies adapted by building more flexible workforce models. Cross-training, automation, and hybrid structures became part of resilience planning. Rather than expanding headcount aggressively during growth periods, many firms now focus on scalable systems that can adjust if demand shifts. Geopolitical developments reinforce the expectation of disruption. Trade restrictions, export controls, and shifting alliances introduced new variables into global operations. Access to critical materials and components could be influenced by policy decisions far outside corporate control. Businesses began integrating geopolitical risk into strategic analysis. Market entry decisions now include regulatory and political scenario planning alongside financial modeling. Energy infrastructure and sustainability requirements further complicate the landscape. Data centers, manufacturing facilities, and logistics networks depend on reliable power. Environmental regulations and grid constraints influence expansion decisions. These factors make long-term certainty even harder to guarantee. Another important lesson is that disruptions often overlap. A supply chain issue can coincide with inflationary pressure. A geopolitical conflict can affect both energy prices and consumer confidence. These compounding effects magnify risk. As a result, companies have moved toward building systemic resilience. This includes maintaining liquidity buffers, diversifying revenue streams, and designing cost structures that can flex with demand. Corporate governance has evolved as well. Boards are more engaged in risk oversight. Risk committees consider cyber threats, climate exposure, regulatory changes, and technology transitions as part of regular strategic discussions. Cybersecurity in particular has become central. As businesses digitize operations, the risk of cyber attacks increases. A single breach can halt operations and damage reputation. Companies treat cybersecurity as essential infrastructure rather than discretionary expense. Investor behavior reinforces the disruption mindset. Markets reward predictability and penalize volatility. Companies that provide cautious guidance and meet expectations are often valued more highly than those that pursue aggressive targets but miss them. This has influenced executive communication. Leaders emphasize resilience, flexibility, and disciplined capital allocation. Overconfidence is avoided. Importantly, expecting disruption does not mean avoiding growth. It means structuring growth to withstand turbulence. Companies are increasingly designing strategies with buildability. Modular investments allow scaling in stages. Partnerships reduce exposure compared to full acquisitions. Variable cost structures allow quicker adjustments during downturns. Culturally, organizations are becoming more comfortable with uncertainty. Decision-making cycles are shorter. Feedback loops are faster. Teams are encouraged to adjust tactics quickly rather than adhering rigidly to outdated plans. The business world learned to expect disruption because repeated experience made optimism without preparation untenable. Stability is no longer treated as a default setting. It is something that must be engineered deliberately. The company's best position for long-term success are those that accept volatility as normal. They invest in technology. They maintain financial strength. They diversify dependencies. They build flexibility into operations. Disruption is no longer a headline event that surprises leadership. It is an ongoing condition that shapes every serious strategic conversation, and in many ways this expectation is a sign of maturity. Businesses are no longer designing strategies around ideal conditions. They are designing for reality. The era of assuming calm has ended. The era of planning for constant change has begun. That is how the business world learned to expect disruption, and why that expectation now defines modern strategy.